Hello, you silly geese. It is I, Lily, and today I bring to the table the builds that I am considering league starting today. Now, I'd like to start this video out by slightly apologizing for the misleading title. I just thought 5 was the most comfortable number to get people to click. This is either 2 or 7 builds, depending on how you count it. For you see, I am considering 2 archetypes across 7 ascendancies. Could be 4 builds if you consider each class a different build and not each ascendancy, so 2, 4, or 7 builds. Make of it what you will. I decided to call it 5 because fuck you. Don't worry, I love you, chat. Anyway, the 2 archetypes I am contemplating today are Thorns and Trail of Caltrops. Now, Thorns has been my go-to build since 0.2. Those are the 2 builds that I am considering league starting, and I think that they will both be benefited greatly by the new nodes that are going to be in the top left of the tree, because they are typically played on the left side of the tree as it is. I currently believe that the strongest league starter for both Caltrops and Thorns is a warrior, so those nodes are going to help us greatly. Now, this video does not serve as a build guide, otherwise it would be several hours long, and I don't want to do that to you, but I will be doing a unified build guide for Caltrops and a separate unified build guide for Thorns before the patch comes out. I have already started working on the Caltrops guide. I've been testing a bunch of stuff to do with Caltrops today, yesterday, the day before, basically over the last few weeks, so I kind of think I know what I'm doing well enough to guide you for that. Now, to get started on the meat and potatoes of the video, let's talk to you about Caltrops. Trail of Caltrops specifically. There are other Caltrops archetypes, but I think that they are boring. You see, Trail of Caltrops is dodge to win, which sounds amazing and also is amazing. It is a 0 button build even in the campaign, unless you consider spamming spacebar to be a button. You don't even have to WASD or click move though. You can just spam spacebar. So I think that's about as 0 button as it gets, because for other AFK builds you have to move around. Now, you can only switch to Trail of Caltrops at level 36 because it is a tier 8 spirit gem, and good luck getting a spirit gem before the Azak Bog in Act 3, which is a level 36 zone, drops you a tier 10 spirit gem, which has a level 36 requirement and also requires 65 dexterity. Up until that point, you will be doing standard warrior or druid leveling, depending on which class you decide to play, or ranger, but I'm not covering that. This is playable on ranger if you would like to do that. Now, as for how this build has been affected by the patch, the Wind Dancer nerfs are going to affect its clear in the endgame. That's something that I have been testing since we got the patch notes the other day. It does still have decent clear with Herald of Ash, but Wind Dancer was incredible clear with this build, so it kind of sucks to lose that, but it will still be a good build, especially with the lower monster density. You will have to target less enemies, so having good single targets should be more important this patch. And let me tell you, Trail of Caltrops has absolutely insane single target. On the current patch, I have a build that does 50,000 damage per Caltrop, and it one-shots most rares I encounter. It doesn't one-shot bosses, but it does a pretty decent amount of damage to them, and on the current patch, you can theoretically reach about 200,000 damage per Caltrop. Now, that is going to be a little bit lower this patch as well, because this has very good level scaling, and it is an attack skill, so we use the Essence of Battle for levels to attack skills on two-handed maces. This means that in the super endgame, we'll be losing 2 levels to Trail of Caltrops in 0.4, but I have simulated that, I have tested it out. It's really not a very significant damage drop. We should still be able to get over 100,000 damage per Caltrop pretty easily, and across 5 Caltrops per dodge roll, that is 500,000 damage per roll. We don't really have DPS as a measurement because you can't really perfectly time rolls. It's quite complicated. If you do want to scale your attack speed, that comes from movement speed, not attack speed. We get 0 attack speed scaling, and that is a little bit awkward being on the warrior / druid side of the tree. You do lose some move speed, not being bottom right, hence why I say ranger is viable, but I just think the power fantasy of the left side of the tree is more fun, and the build is still very fast. You've dodge rolled before, you know that it's not much slower than sprinting, so the build is fast. It's dodge to win. It's pretty great. Now, for Trail of Caltrops in 0.4, The Last of the Vaal, there are 3 main ascendancy options that I personally will be considering for Trail of Caltrops, and these are Smith of Kitava, Shaman, or Oracle. In 0.3, Deadeye was very viable. In 0.4, I believe that Pathfinder will be very viable, but I have no intention of playing either of those classes, at least not on League Start. I might try them both out when I have a higher budget, but I just don't really enjoy Ranger, and I don't want to level with bows, so I choose to either go Warrior or Druid, depending on some final information that we are still waiting for. Now, to cover those ascendancies and how you would pick each one, we first off have the Caltrops Smith. This is the safe option. This is the tried and tested option. I have leveled a Caltrops Smith this week and can confirm that even in SSF, it is a very powerful skill to level with, and the changes to Smith of Kitava in the 0.4 patch are a significant buff, including the fact that you can get 100% increased Thorns damage, which does scale your Caltrops damage. This is a huge amount of damage. It is great, honestly. And also, you can get poison immune for Viper Napuazzo, which will help you be a lot less squishy for, honestly, what I think is one of the most difficult boss fights of the campaign. What's also very nice about Smith of Kitava is that you can take the Coal Stoker Ascendancy Notable, which makes it so that you need a lot less resistances in the endgame, making your early endgame progression a lot cheaper, and that is great. However, a downside about Smith of Kitava is that because you can't use a unique body armor, you really don't scale well into the uber endgame, so you will eventually switch to Titan, but I would say you'll be doing this around a 50 to 100 divine budget, depending on the cost of items, so you will be playing the Smith of Kitava for the entirety of your League Start experience, and I believe that playing this build on Smith of Kitava could even get you to Arbiter of Ash without too much difficulty. When you do switch to the Titan, you will be a strength stacker, so that'll change a lot about the build. I will probably not necessarily include that in my build guide that I drop before the patch comes out. That will probably be an updated build guide later in the league if I decide to start as a Warrior Caltrops build. Now, the second ascendancy that you can consider with Caltrops is Shaman. Now here I am hoping to scale off of Rage. The Shaman has natural Rage regeneration, which is very nice for Caltrops, because Caltrops is not a melee attack, but does scale very well off of attack damage, so being able to get that natural Rage regeneration from the Shaman will be extremely powerful, and what could even be more powerful if GGG changes something over the leaked Ascendancy nodes leaked so far, is that the Druidic Champion node currently gives more spell damage per rage, but if they change that to increased spell damage per rage, then we can run Crown of Eyes to double dip into that rage for even more damage, which should allow us to play a rage stacker, which to me sounds incredibly fun. And while I cannot simulate the damage of this build, I do believe it'll be much higher than the strength stacker version that I have been cooking so far, and you could maybe even play it with strength stacking. I don't know, it could be believable to see 300,000 damage per Caltrop, but also this could be completely dead on arrival. Something that's also worth considering is that Adaptation seems like it'll be a very strong defensive layer for basically any Shaman build, and Bonded Runes could be amazing, or they could do nothing for us. We will have to wait and see, but I think that is a very cool concept, and I really want to try it out, so that makes me personally very tempted to League Start this version. I think that it is currently my top League Start candidate, but it really does depend on a lot of factors and things that we just don't know until GGG gives us the passive tree. Now, for your third Trail of Caltrops Ascendancy option, you have Oracle. Now, this is a very risky option if you decide to commit to it, because I will not be able to put out anything even remotely resembling a build guide for this, because it is the most reliant on the changes to the tree. It's specifically reliant on the new Paths Not Taken mechanic. I am hoping that there will be Hazard and or Thorns clusters in the Paths Not Taken that will be very, very fucking cool. And if there aren't, then I wouldn't touch this Ascendancy with a 10-foot pole for either Caltrops or Thorns. Lesser harm will definitely help survive for the Caltrops build, but you kind of want at least some damage from your Ascendancy, and Oracle will have nothing to offer if there are not nodes on path not taken that help us out. Now that is what I'm thinking for Caltrops, but the other archetype that I am considering league starting is Thorns. Now this was my league start in 0.3 and my favorite character that I played in 0.2. Thorns is a very, very cool archetype. If you don't know anything about Thorns, the basics of it are that you get hit and you deal retaliatory damage. Now if you've seen Thorns in other games, you might think that that is a boring build, that there is no engagement with the game. However, this is not the case, because in Path of Exile 2, the main damage dealers of Thorns isn't the actually getting hit part, it's the support gems Quill Burst and Barbs that apply your Thorns damage on hit, so there is actually an active gameplay component of Thorns. It isn't just stand there and kill things. Although if you do want stand there and kill things gameplay, it will work. You're just going to be getting about a quarter of the damage you could otherwise get. Now, Thorns does have one major downside that I theorize might be better in 0.4 than it was in 0.3, but it is still a bit rough for a lot of the player base, and that is that trade is more or less mandatory for Thorns. You cannot play Thorns at all without the Barbs and Quill Burst supports, so you either have to wait until you get a tier 3 support gem to switch over, or you have to trade for a tier 3 support gem, which means that you either have to take a late league start or hope for some very good early currency RNG so that you can afford these support gems. But more expensive is the Crown of the Pale King, a completely mandatory unique for Thorns, because it makes it so that you can actually deal damage to ranged enemies and spellcasters, which just kind of sucks. A lot of Thorns players are hoping that with the top left tree changes we'll maybe get a keystone or something like that that will act similarly to the Crown of the Pale King, but as it stands right now, it's kind of just very painful and annoying to league start Thorns, especially last league where Crown of the Pale King early on in the league was 2 to 3 chaos. It very quickly dropped to 1 exalt, but that took about 2 days, so if you're planning to start at league start, I maybe would plan a different build that can maybe transition into Thorns, maybe around Act 5 or in the early end game. In terms of changes to Thorns in 0.4, I do believe that Crown of the Pale King will be cheaper because a lot of the Thorns community is actually planning to start something else. You can join the Thorn Hub Discord at the link below if you want to see the discussion about that, but a lot of us are kind of bored of being forced to use Crown of the Pale King and being forced into crit by Briar Patch, so we are staving off for this league while we wait for some changes. That doesn't make the build less fun, and in fact will probably make a lot of the gear much cheaper, but it is something that is worth considering. If you have league started Thorns before, nothing's really changed, and if you haven't, seriously try it out. It's a ton of fun even though you have to trade early on. In terms of changes in the actual patch notes, Thorn skin has been slightly nerfed. You cannot stack it multiple times. There were spirit stacking Thorns archetypes that just went for as much increased Thorns damage as possible with Thorn skin. That is gone. But honestly, I think a lot of the best Thorns builds only used 1 or 2 Thorn skin gems, so this isn't actually as big of a nerf as some people are making it out to be. And we also had plenty of damage in 0.3. I don't think damage is something we're going to be wanting super hard, especially because there has been a buff to Brass Dome, which was the best in slot body armor in 0.3. It's definitely going to be the best body armor in 0.4. You can get almost 4,000 armor with an uncorrupted Brass Dome, which with the Revenge notable on the passive tree is 400 flat Thorns damage. That is the equivalent of 2 T1 Thorns prefixes, so it's pretty fucking insane, honestly. What we are coping for in 0.4 is that changes to the top left of the tree, where most Thorns builds are inclined to path, will give us a lot more power. Maybe there will be some new Thorns nodes, some new Thorns notables. Maybe if we can dream a Thorns key keystone or two, that would be amazing. But I see no world where the tree changes are a nerf to Thorns, and I think it is extremely likely that the tree changes are going to be a buff to Thorns. So overall, I think Thorns is at least slightly buffed this league, but we don't have information to know just how buffed because of how reliant it's going to probably be on all of the new nodes and clusters on the tree. Now, I think I've rambled for long enough about generic Thorns. I think I should now tell you about your Ascendancy options. I will be considering for my own league starting with Smith, Warbringer, Shaman, or Oracle. However, Ritualist is also a very strong archetype for Thorns. Infernalist was what I league started last league, and it should still be playable this league. And also, a few people are theory crafting Acolyte of Chayula Thorns builds, so you can kind of play Thorns on any Ascendancy, but it is going to be the absolute easiest on Warbringer, but more on that later. I'm first going to talk about Smith as a Thorns Ascendancy, because this one is very exciting to me. You see, the Smith of Kitava is my absolute favorite Ascendancy in PoE 2. It has been since they announced it. It was my 0.2 league starter. I really desperately tried to find a way for it to work with Thorns in 0.2 and 0.3, but it did not work. However, in 0.4, we have gotten the buff to Smith that Thorns needs to be able to actually run it. That makes Smith of Kitava kind of the new sparkly Ascendancy for Thorns. Now, this is only going to be a league start option, and you're eventually going to want to switch to Titan, because that is just the best, honestly, one of the best Ascendancies in the whole game for basically any build in the Uber end game, because Hulking form is just kind of fucking nutty. But for the league start, I think Smith will be very cool. Firstly, with the new white armor options, you will get 200 armor per Ascendancy notable. With the Revenge notable, this is 20 flat Thorns damage per Ascendancy point. That's quite a bit. But on top of that, we're also getting a 100% increased Thorns damage notable, as well as an immune to ignite, poison, and bleeding notable, and damage over time is the enemy of Thorns, so this is quite significant. Also, like I mentioned earlier, for Caltrops, you can get that before Viper Napuazzi to be poison immune against her, which will make that fight 10 million times easier. It might even be the easiest campaign boss with new Smith. Now, Smith has also had a few other buffed notables on the white armor area of things, but what I've mentioned is what's important. If you want more details, you can take a look at my build guide that I will put out later. It's also worth noting, like I mentioned with Trail of Caltrops, Smith of Kitava makes it very easy to be resistance capped for your tier 1 maps and beyond, because you need half as much resistance, and most of it can come from fire res, so it's very easy to be somewhat unkillable in your early mapping, which is very nice. Now, what is worth noting is no matter how much you juice the Smith of Kitava white armor, a brass dome will still be better, but a brass dome will also be a good handful or two of divines. So Smith is, I think, a very strong option until you get those divines for a brass dome, at which point, honestly, you're definitely best off switching to Titan. But I think Smith of Kitava will still be the most fun league start for Thorns this league. Now, of course, the Smith of Kitava league start for Thorns is a little bit risky because it hasn't been done before, but what has been done before is Thorns Warbringer, my second Ascendancy option for Thorns this league. Now, Warbringer is just the old reliable, and for the purposes of Thorns, it hasn't been changed at all, so it will just be the safe, consistent league starter that we know it to be. Now, firstly, what makes Warbringer great for Thorns is that you get free armor break from your first 2 Ascendancy points, which allows you to trigger scavenge plating with absolutely no thinking. It takes an entire button off of your build because you don't have to run Resonating Shield. But then beyond that, in your future Ascendancies, you can also get to 75% block chance, which could be a 25% increase in damage, and also a 75 more modifier to your damage if you decide to go for a Chernobog's Pillar build eventually, which is very, very tasty. If you don't want to go Avatar of Fire and Shunbox Pillar, you can also still switch to Titan, which is just an absolutely insane endgame build for Thorns. However, if you switch to Titan, again, you're going to need to stick on Resonating Shield, because you're actually going to have to break armor. This is why we love Warbringer. Not having to break armor makes Thorns a 1-button build as opposed to a 2-button build, which just makes life a lot more comfortable. Now, for the slightly copium options for a Thorns League start, we first off have Thorns Shaman. I don't actually think this one is particularly copium, because there are just things about it that are guaranteed to be good. I don't see a world where the Unbound Rune of Tithing doesn't have a good Thorns modifier, seeing as that is the existing Thorns rune that everyone runs in all of their slots. I also think that the Avatar of Evolution Ascendancy notable, with its adaptation for reduced elemental damage and physical damage taken, will make the build insanely tanky, and if you stick a Defiance of Destiny on top of that, I think you could become nearly unkillable short of bosses that one-shot. For this reason, I think that Thorns Shaman will possibly be the strongest Simulacrum farmer of 0.4. Maybe I'm coping a little bit too hard, but that's what I think. If you want to farm Simulacrum, I definitely think you should start Thorns Shaman. Of course, it is going to be very reliant on those new nodes on the top left side of the tree, so we really don't know enough. I can't put out a build guide for this. I can only say, hey, this will be good, try it. But if you don't know how to build your own builds, then don't. I am strongly considering this option because I really like Simulacrum and I know how to build my own builds. And if I do pick it, I will eventually make a build guide for it, but that will probably be like a week or two into the league. So if you don't know how to cook a build for yourself, just play Warbringer or Smith instead. And for your final Thorns Ascendancy option, at least that I will be covering and caring about, we have Thorns Oracle. Now, this is either going to be insanely good or insanely terrible, because all we are really caring about at all is paths not taken. Now, it does sound like you can probably get quite tanky with Oracle's other nodes, but they're not as good as Shaman's nodes, and they're not as good as Warbringer's nodes, so we are really just hoping that those paths not taken notables will have some Thorns stuff. If it doesn't have some Thorn stuff, just actually don't touch this. So I'm going to recommend don't try this at home. However, this is my favorite option for Thorns for the 0.4 League start, because I think this is where we are most likely to get a Crown of the Pale King alternative, but that is also very much me coping, so we're just gonna have to wait and see. We don't have the passive tree yet, and when we do get the passive tree, we also don't know if we're gonna get the paths not taken notables yet. So very risky league start, but I think it'll be an extremely fun one if it works. Anyway, that's my picks for league starts for 0.4. There are tons of other builds out there, so go spread your wings, check out other creators. But if you want to play Thorns or Caltrops in the new league, please consider waiting around for my build guides. You can drop a subscribe, a like, and a comment, because all of those engagements will make sure that YouTube is much more likely to recommend you my build guides when I release them. Also, just in case YouTube decides to be a piece of shit as it loves to do lately, join the Thorn Hub, link in the description down below. That is the Discord for all things Thorns, and kind of at the moment all things plants and Caltrops too. Kalturak is completely obsessed with the plant druid, and I myself am completely obsessed with Caltrops, so there is a lot of not Thorns mixed in there as well. Stick around for all the content that I will be producing over the coming weeks. I will be making at least 2 build guides before patch comes out. I'm actually not going to say at least, definitely 2, no more. I don't have time or energy to make more than that, but I will be doing everything I can to get the 2 build guides out before League start. And after League start, you can expect highlights videos, new build guides, updates on existing build guides. So like, subscribe, all that jazz. Stick around to see what I do throughout the league. I can't wait to play the last of the Vaal, so I will see you all in Twitch chat. Links also down in the description. Goodbye!